So I'm excited to announce my new free 15-week intermediate program. I've been wanting to do this one for a while. The program I currently have on my website, if you've seen that before, that's probably from about 3 years ago. Well, it's still a very good program. There's definitely some changes I'd make to that, things I've learned, things I've adjusted, and especially for a templated style approach, there's definitely some things that we want to make sure to allow so that it can be appealing and effective for a broad spectrum, which I'll definitely, throughout this video, I'm really going to be able to break this down. And so within this video, this is really the culmination of everything I've been putting out for the last 10 months or so. I believe I have 8 different videos with 342 minutes covering programming specific topics. I'm going to link all of those below because the fact of the matter is I'm going to try and dive into as much as possible as I write this program live while I'm recording it for you all to see. But within that, it would be like a 10-hour video if I explained every single aspect of it, because a lot of it's going to be linking back to these past videos. So if you haven't watched those and you want further information of kind of the thought process that goes behind some of these things in a little bit more detail, definitely check those out. So what I'm going to be doing within this video and the next video I'm going to release is live recording me writing this program in its entirety. It's going to be a total of 3 training blocks with an optional block for peaking. So since there's going to be 4 tabs for 4 different training blocks, but that third training block is going to be an option of whether you want to just run a regular training block that can then be cycled back into the regular program, or if you're wanting to run the peaking block into a meet day testing. So within these videos, how this is going to be laid out is in video 1. In this video, I'm going to be writing the first training block, and then also going over kind of how to edit and interpret and to program within the training block. So you know what kind of you need to insert, what to rate, things that are going to be kind of be done within it, and everything you need to know to be able to start today if you'd like to. Just because of the length, this is probably going to be an hour or so video alone. I'm going to break this up into a 3-part video series where I'm going to cover obviously block 1 and how to edit and program in this one. The second video is going to be going over block 2, so weeks 6 through 10. And then the final video will be the third training block, which, as I mentioned, that training block is actually going to be 2. So we're going to have the optional training block of just kind of running through a normal training block and do a deload to then come back around and rerun block 1. Or there's going to be the optional block of kind of peaking testing, and I'll go a little bit more in kind of my general peaking process and whatnot. So there'll be a 3-part video series, hopefully release those every 3 to 4 weeks, which will kind of line up with when most people, if they're starting now, will be doing the program. But if not, it'll kind of also give you just time, if you're just watching these to kind of learn the programming aspect, just time to kind of dissect each one versus giving you a big old like 4-hour video right off the bat. Break these up so you can be able to kind of break down each video individually and have an understanding of it. When going through this program, I call it an intermediate program, mainly because not that an advanced lifter couldn't use this program, but typically a difference between an advanced and an intermediate lifter is an advanced lifter might need a little bit more individualization to really kind of eke out those last little bit of gains. Could you get that from this program? Very, very possible. But I think a lot of times, including myself, including other coaches, we tend to label it intermediate because 1, that has a little bit more vast appeal. But 2, that's probably who it's going to work best for. And even within that, understand that this is a template. This is a free program. It's not individualized to every single person. So what this is kind of if someone came to me, they had no training data background, I had no information on them. I knew that they'd been powerlifting. I knew their maxes, but like in the sense of they had really nothing to take off of what they've done. This might be my general thought process of what I do. This is kind of the average of all of my athletes into one, of total set count, of how I program intensity, all of those things. This is kind of the average. This would be like the starting point. And whenever I get with a new athlete that I actually coach one-on-one, basically you can think of this as the starting point in my head, and then all of the information I get from them then expands upon this and starts to elaborate on what we're going to be doing differently from just the very general stereotype of the blanketed approach that I'm going to kind of do within this program. So yes, within any template, it's going to, for the most part, work for the vast majority of people, but there's definitely going to be people that are outliers that this isn't going to be optimal for, based off of either the intensity-based approach, the volume of it, the exercise selection, but I'm going to try and do my best to do things that are going to be as wide appealing to the general spectrum as possible. So let's get into training block 1. The one thing I will say is I haven't written any of the program out. as you'll see on here, is completely blank. The only thing that I've done kind of prior to this is already kind of think out a general structure of how I want to lay out the training days and the exercise selection, just because sometimes that can kind of be I don't want to say a boring process, but that can kind of be a tedious process that's not going to look good in the sense of a video of me thinking for 30 minutes. Sometimes of kind of trying to think exercise selection and how to lay these out block to block. So that I've already got in my head, but you're going to see kind of one, I'm going to explain why I pick these exercises, but also two, obviously you're going to see me, I haven't programmed them. You're going to see me program all these weeks in live time as we're going through this video. So what I will show you, can I already kind of see here, we do have these recommended splits, and that's kind of where I talked about where I have already this kind of laid out in mind. So this was written for this split in particular, what you're going to see written out, a Monday, Wednesday, Friday, Saturday, or something similar. It could be Tuesday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, just something within this general range. And you can see here we've got different primary days for squat and secondary days, and then bench and deadlift as well. And that kind of gives you an idea of kind of how this is laid out in structure of which days you should be feeling the strongest, which days maybe there's a little bit more fatigue, and kind of the general layout of it. The optional layout would be the second one, is Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday. And what you're going to see here is basically all you're going to do is if you run this second structure, and like I said, it doesn't have to be these exact days, just has to be these exact days in between, which I do think is very important. If you've watched some of my other videos, I know there are some coaches who think that, who are kind of on the spectrum of it doesn't really matter which days you do it as long as you get it done in a week. I personally disagree with that. I think it is very important, the layout and structure within that kind of weekly microcycle. I say weekly because while it could be outside of a 7-day period, most people, the vast majority of people are going to be doing a microcycle within a 7-day period just to fit within their schedule. And I think that definitely matters because we're trying to have certain rest periods between days. So this is the secondary one, and really all you're going to do if you run the secondary option is you're going to take that tertiary bench day that was on Wednesday, which if it was same thing, it would be Tuesday here, and you're just going to put it on Saturday. So it's going to show, so like as you're going to go through, I don't have days written out. You see day 1, day 2, day 3, day 4. Day 1 would be Monday, day 2 Wednesday, day 3 Friday, day 4 Saturday. And so all you do, even though you'd see that tertiary bench on the second day, aka like Tuesday here, you would just flip-flop that and put it on Saturday. It'd be a very easy switch, and that's all you're gonna do. So hopefully that makes sense. I'll probably explain that a little bit more in the second video I make, covering the breakdown of kind of like how to program and everything. But yes, so okay, getting into it. So up here, we've got our training maxes. Those are going to be adjustable. What you'll need to do is you'll need to go in here. This is going to be a view only link. I'll have the link below in the description box as well as on my website. You'll need to make a copy into your own Google Drive, but then you can easily edit these any way you want. You can go through here. Doesn't really matter. I mean, yes, you have a 4,300 pound bench press, but yeah, go in there and edit those. It's also going to give you the kilos here. We got a calculated weekly max chart, which you're going to see kind of how that kind of works out and plays into the programming as I write it. And then here, for those who maybe don't have as much experience with RPE, is just a quick reference guide on RPE and how to use that. So one thing I do need to pull up, because this is definitely something we're going to be going back and forth on, is my PR's RPE chart. I will actually make sure to help you guys out so you can kind of follow along for those who are wanting more of the in-depth programming side of this. I'll make sure to have a view-only spreadsheet for this as well that I'll include in the description box below so that you can be able to see that. Actually, you know what I'll do is I'll just put this in the program so you can be able to access that RPE chart in the program and be able to see it. That'll just be like a 5th tab there. So. All right, so let's dive into it. So something I'm gonna do, I'm gonna show you kind of what I do, even though I already have this laid out. So here you can see Monday is secondary bench. So usually what I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna go type in these things before. So I already have that kind of laid out there. We've got primary squat, tertiary bench, secondary deadlift. Going back here, Friday's the primary day. So we got primary bench, and then we've got secondary squat and secondary deadlifts. So that's usually the first thing I'll do. So like this is me skipping ahead since I already kind of figured out the general layout for exercise selection. This is the first thing I typically do is I'm going to figure out the general structure of kind of how these days are going to lay out. I would say something maybe I do a little bit different than some coaches is I tend to bias to putting deadlifts on the same day as squats. I think especially this is also because this is being a program written templated, and there is not a sumo versus conventional variation. And while I could have done that, I don't think I think both of these can work for either. I don't think they're that vastly different that we need two different templates. It just really depends on the individual. But within that, I tend to like to put sumo in particular on the same day as squats. Conventional sometimes as well. Conventional we can usually put on a different day sometimes because it carries a little less fatigue with squats, and so it's a little bit further away in the specificity range in the sense of kind of the hip versus knee flexion. But in general, I tend to like to do that because it helps to spread out fatigue better. Fact of the matter is squat and deadlift can carry fatigue over. So if we are deadlifting and squatting, we're then doing some type of similar pattern 4 days a week. Now, like I said, not that I don't program like that. I think, again, this is a templated approach of what I think I would start with for a lifter that I have no knowledge on, but I'm just trying to think of the average stereotypical layout that I would do. I'm going to do this. I think it's a bit easier to manage fatigue when we're putting deadlift on the same day as squat, as there's going to be a bit less interruption and kind of construed data by having other days where we deadlift on. And then second is that we deadlift after we squat in a meet. I don't think that's the worst approach to go about. Squat can definitely affect deadlift. Some of you may have hit an all-out grinder third attempt squat, seen the effects of that going into deadlift, and kind of see how that affects things. So I don't think it's the worst thing to get used to deadlifting after squat, as well as lastly, it can help to kind of mask deadlift a little, or kind of self-limit deadlift. I don't want to say mask it, because it possibly could mask it a little bit for some people. Some people it doesn't, some people it does by doing squat and deadlift on the same day. But it can kind of help to self-limit deadlift a little bit, especially on that secondary day, being after a primary squat. It's probably definitely going to self-limit that secondary deadlift, which isn't the worst thing ever, because it's going to kind of be able to control fatigue on that day a little bit versus having to use higher absolute intensities while still working at similar relative intensities. So, all right, so getting into the actual programming of these exercises, the exercise selection, I'm usually going to start with kind of these primary days for each exercise and then work through that. Within this block structure, I don't follow like a super standard periodization model. Like it's not going to be like hypertrophy, strength, peaking per se. It's going to follow maybe a similar pattern that to an extent, but not perfectly. Block one is going to be a bit more, probably a bit more volume, but it's also about kind of pushing relative intensity hard and hitting rep PRs on some different variations. So we can still be able to kind of hit some heavier like relative intensities and RPEs, but doing it with variations that are a bit more self-limiting, because I think it's going to be that's a bit more sustainable for most people. I think for most people, if they do 15 straight weeks of comp specificity, it's going to be a bit rough. So blocks 1 and 2, or 2 and 3, we're definitely going to get a little bit more specific with the exercise selection. Block 1, a little bit more volume, but definitely going to be on the end of still pushing strength. So I'd almost call this more of kind of a strength block, kind of peaking in sense of blocks 1, 2, and 3. But we're going to add a little bit more volume here just for the instance of kind of benefits of kind of hypertrophy and workload. So for that primary squat day, if you've watched anything I do, I definitely am a big fan of pause squats. So we're going competition pause squat on day 1, or that day 2, that primary day. And you're going to see here, I'm going to put 3 slots there because you're going to kind of see how that kind of breaks up as I go through it. But also I program here 0, 1, 0. That's the tempo cadence, so you'll see that a lot. So 0 second eccentric, so no tempo per se. 1 second pause, and then 0 second concentric, so nothing special there. Like it's just normal speed. So got competition pause squat on that primary squat day. And then on that secondary day, what we'll do is high bar or SSB squat. So just depending on which you have access to, it doesn't really matter there. Both these are going to be pretty similar and program. When you see that I program these are going to be at the same kind of percentages. Most people are relatively similar in the strength spectrum on high bar and SSB. So we're going to program those about the same. So, all right. So we got pause squat on the primary day, high bar or SSB on that secondary day. So going to bench, what we're going to be doing there is we're just going to, I'm usually going to be doing more competition standard bench pressing year round. So we're going to do competition bench press with a 1 second pause. Let's get that throughout. Secondary day, we're going to go competition tempo bench press, just to work a little bit more on control. and the positional requirements and leg drive and whatnot. So that needs to be 310. So we're gonna have a 3-second eccentric there. And you're seeing I'm doing some of these as 3 different spots, some as 2. That's gonna make a little bit more sense as I kind of go through it, and you're gonna kind of see how I program that. So that's usually it's gonna have a couple reasons there. It's going to be dependent if I'm just going to do one top set versus and then just back offs, or if I'm going to do some middle back offs, or if I'm going to do fatigue drop sets. I already kind of have in mind what I'm going to be doing there. So that's why these are kind of getting planned out in that manner. So and then for that tertiary day, we're going to go Larson close grip bench. Can't type. Bench press 010, and to notate 3 fingers in from normal grip. So if you usually do max grip index finger, that means pinky finger is going to be on the knurling marker. So, all right, so we got bench program there. We got our primary deadlift day. Oop, I did secondary both. It's got to be primary deadlift. So primary deadlift is going to be pause deadlifts on this first block and just off the floor. So I'm going to notate that, barely breaking off the floor and then pausing. So from there, I'm just gonna add my pretty little color since I have those in. This is just me kind of separating these. Reasons why you're gonna see coaches do this is not because it needs to look fancy. Oop, I forgot to do secondary deadlift. Secondary deadlift, we're gonna do RDLs. That's gonna allow for a little bit higher volume. It's going to be dependent on the person if I'm going to do higher rep deadlifts or not. For a templated approach, I'm probably going to stay away from doing super high rep deadlifts. There are definitely people I program that for, but again, this is a template. This is for the standard person taking what standard, just the average lifter would probably respond to. So in that case, I'm probably not going to program deadlifts over like 5 or 6 reps. And for more information on that, like I said, I explained that in some other videos of kind of my reasoning behind that. But I am a big fan of RDLs. I think that does a great job of being able to kind of accumulate that posterior chain workload that we need there and working on the hinge-based movement. So what I was getting at was these colors don't really mean anything outside of this. Just makes it easier for myself as a coach when I've got 35 people I coach and programming for, that when I pull up their program, I can easily see what's going on. I just know that this is the color I use for squat, this is the color I use for bench, this is the color I use for deadlift. So it's very easy for me to be able to kind of know where I'm going and interpret things and look at it quickly, versus if they're all just the same color, it kind of muddles it and it makes it hard for me as a coach to be able to kind of look at it. And I would even assume for a lifter, it kind of muddies it a little bit. So that's requires explanation, mainly because there is a purpose to that. So, all right. So we've got our main lifts set out. So from there, let's get in our accessory movements. So accessories can be individualized, but I'm gonna kind of just go a general framework of what we're gonna do. As well as accessories are gonna stay pretty consistent through all 15 weeks. And that's pretty common. Like if you're gonna be doing accessory movements, they should be staying in for 2 to 3 blocks. And since this is a 3 block, I'm not going to just change on block 3 all of a sudden when you might be peaking all the accessories. They're pretty much going to stay pretty standard with rep changes throughout here. Where usually, like 2 to 3 blocks, and then we'll swap some of them out is the pretty good standard, but you'll want some time with them. You don't want to switch them out too much because you do want to progress with them, especially within the rep schemes as well. So we'll start on this primary squat day. So I'm going to kind of reference here so I make sure I've got it. Primary squat day. This is an SBD day, so it's pretty tough. You don't want to add too many accessories, so we're just going to make it simple here and just have one accessory on this day, and that's going to be belt squat or leg press. And as I go through here, I'm already going to start programming out sets. I'll explain that in a little bit. But I did belt squat or leg press here, mainly because I love Bulgarian split squats. I love some other things, but when you're doing a templated style approach or just a general approach for an athlete, you got to choose things that you know are very easy to be able to accomplish the task and they're going to do right. It's pretty hard to screw up a belt squat or a leg press. I can put this in a program that's going to be going out to a lot of people in the sense of this template, and it's going to probably work. If I did Bulgarian split squats, if 10 people do it, maybe 4 people do Bulgarian split squats right, 4 people do them wrong and 2 people just hate them and skip them, it's not going to work in the same manner. So we got to choose things that are going to be easily kind of repeatable and done correctly by a large audience to make sure that we're actually getting the effect we want. So in this sense, I'm going to choose belt squat or leg press just because that's going to be a very easy exercise for most people to be able to do correctly. So, all right. So from there, let's move on to our primary bench day. I'm going to program some accessories here. So we're going to have some dumbbell bench press. Dumbbell bench press. We're going to have 4 sets there for dumbbell bench press. And on the other day, let's go incline dumbbell bench press or machine press of choice. So you're going to see some of choices here because again, this is a template. I don't know the exact location of your gym, what you have. So there's going to be some more of choices here so you can kind of insert. So there's a lot of powerlifting gyms that don't have very many machines, so it's pretty common for me to do a lot of dumbbell work or weighted dips. I'm not putting dips in this program even though I love them because dips are a bit iffy with some people. And so again, I'm trying to pick things that are going to be safe for the general population to be able to do. Not that dips are dangerous, but I know most people are going to be able to do dumbbell bench press or dumbbell bench press or incline dumbbell bench press correctly without any issues. Same with the machine chest press of choice. We're going to do 3 sets there. So you can already kind of see there, obviously I have dumbbell bench press. As you see, the programming is going to be a little bit more high intensity when we get to the RPE, but obviously more volume on this day, less volume on this day since it is the secondary day. So that pressing accessory is going to be a little bit easier. So from there, we're going to do some hamstring work. So I'm going to throw in some hamstring work on this day 4. So we're going to do hamstring curl of choice. So that could be any machine variation, hamstring machine curl of choice. We'll put that. We're going to do 3 sets there. And then last couple things we're going to do is we're going to do some back accessories. So we're going to insert that in. So let's do machine, or let's do pull down of choice, row of choice. We're gonna do 4 each there. Come down here, row, chest supported row of choice. Notice I did chest supported row of choice here. There's a reason. Here, it's not as important if you did a Penley row or like a barbell row or something that's not chest supported. Well, that's fine. There's not anything that's going to fatigue too much. But here, we've got our primary deadlift day. So I want to make sure we have a good amount of time between this day and this day to be able to kind of make sure we're not taxing that low back. Obviously, we could tax our low back a little bit for squats there, but I don't think that's as much as important. That's not going to have as much carryover. I'm more worried about making sure we're keeping that back fresh and plenty of recovery by this primary deadlift day. So chest supported row choice is going to be a bit better. So as for just general exercise selection and totals here, I'm doing 3 back exercises or lat exercises, you might call it, pulls with 4 sets each. I don't know if there's any kind of I'm not going to go into some scientific reason of why I think that's the right amount. It's just that that's what I found kind of the general framework is people tend to do well with about 10 to 15 sets a week of back exercise. So of kind of pull movements. So therefore that's the reason we're going to have those in there is for 3 exercises, 4 sets each for a total of 12 sets. So outside of that, we're going to do some tricep and some upper back. So on this primary day, I'm going to put the tricep extension of choice. 3 sets. We're doing that on the primary day because if I'm going to want to fatigue those primary movers of the pecs and the triceps on one day, I want it to be that primary day so that we can be able to recover enough coming all the way back around. And the last thing I'm going to be throwing in there is an upper back of choice, and that works well on this day. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. So just for general purposes, yeah, we'll throw it in here. We'll keep each day to about 4 exercises, and that kind of helps to kind of spread it out. Upper back of choice. Upper back of choice would be something like a face pull. Let's actually just throw that in. I'm just going to do face pulls. Everyone should have access to some form of a face pull, so that works out well. So, all right, so we've got accessory work programmed in. We've got the exercise selection all planned out. let's go through sets now. So primary squat day. What we're gonna do is we're gonna be doing 9 total sets on squats. Again, this is just a general kind of average of what I see for most people. So what we're gonna be doing here is 5 sets on that primary day, 4 sets on that secondary day. And as you see when I program it, not only is there gonna be 5 sets here, there's gonna be kind of a middle back off set. So average intensity is gonna be a little bit higher from that. Whereas on this day 4, we're just gonna have 1 top set followed by back offs. So for bench press, we're gonna see a couple things here, and I actually need to copy from another program to be able to get this programmed in correctly. So we're gonna have a top set, and then what we're gonna have is we're gonna have fatigue drop sets. 4 total sets equals 4 minus this. So what you're gonna see if you insert in 2, it's gonna tell you to do 2 sets. If you insert in 4, it's gonna have you do 0 sets. And what's gonna make more sense there is once I copy and paste from this, you're gonna see, make sure I have that in the right spot, how that works out a little bit better. So I'm also gonna start inserting some things in here because I already know some days I'm gonna have RPE versus I'm not going to have RPE. So let's make sure that is going to come out right. So RPE on that day, that day, that day, and this day. So I'll explain that in a little bit. So yeah, so we got 5 total sets on this primary bench day, and it's going to be fatigue drop. So I'll explain fatigue drop a little bit as I go through it, but that's gonna basically make sure that this day is going to be regulated to the right kind of average intensity as well as kind of a high peak intensity on that primary top set. So after that, we've got our secondary bench day, and what we're gonna do, 5 sets there, but again, you're gonna see a little bit of a difference in kind of how I'm programming that day. We're not gonna do fatigue drop, but we are gonna do a middle back off set. And again, you'll see that in a little bit as I go through. And then here, we're gonna have 4 sets on this day, 1 top set, 3 back offs. So then lastly, we're gonna go into deadlifts. We're going to have 4 total sets on this day, a top set, a middle back off, then final back offs, and then we're RDLs, we're gonna have 3 sets on that day. So in total, 9 sets on bench or squat, we have 14 sets on bench, and then we have 7 sets on deadlift. So last here is going to be doing some rep ranges. So let's start with squat. So this is going, like I said, going to be a little bit of a higher volume block, but I tend to, if I'm programming for just a general person, it doesn't always mean that I'm going to do super high reps. I think high reps are going to be individualized based off of the person. There's a lot of things that kind of dictate that. I do have a Instagram post I made on that, and a lot of that kind of goes back to distance travel. People who generally have a shorter range of motion are going to be able to handle higher reps better, but I think the general population tends to warrant more to kind of being somewhere in like the 2 to 7 rep range, even though 7's higher, right? Like I'm talking like 8 to 10 being super high. So what we're gonna be doing here, we are going to work in throughout this block of kind of hitting heavy triples on our primary movements on these variations. So competition pause squat, we're gonna have a top set of 3 followed by a middle back off of 5 and a final back off of 5 for a little bit higher volume. I'm a big fan of always making sure that these top sets are typically more intensity based, especially on these primary days, and higher average peak intensity, where if we wanna get a little bit more volume, we adjust that as needed through that back off work. So primary day, top set of 3 followed by 5s, and then for that secondary day, we're gonna go top set of 4 followed by 6s. And we're also going to put, we're also going to put that there. So I'm actually going to just throw that everywhere. I always put these little red boxes on the main sets of the day for a couple reasons. One, it gets the athlete kind of reminded, it's like a reminder this is the set that's kind of the main set we're looking at, as well as, again, just like the exercise selection of being able to have an easy access as a coach or an athlete to be able to know kind of what's on the day just by the color of it. It's also kind of helping to kind of guide me to where I want to go in the sense of kind of RPE. So, all right, so day 3 bench press, which is the primary bench press day. We're gonna push a top triple on that day too. You're gonna say, why are you pushing top triples on everything? I don't think there's anything special about triples. I just think when it comes to kind of pushing intensity that has good transfer to the actual 1RM strength, doubles and triples are going to be definitely closer in specificity range than pushing anything above that. Anything after we go after triples, we're going to probably start seeing some type of form breakdown on reps 4, 5, or 6. And I'm just not sure if they transfer as well. I think those first like 1 to 3 reps tend to have the best transfer in the sense of skill practice and in the sense of force output and all that kind of stuff. So in the sense of kind of looking at rep work and kind of like a goal of like what's hitting rep PRs, I like rep PRs of doubles and triples. While a rep PR on 5 isn't the worst thing ever, I don't think that really, I don't know if that translates that great to what is your actual 1RM. For some people it might, but again, general population, if I'm going to be pushing rep work, I'm probably going to be biasing towards doubles and triples. And as you're going to see, as we get into later blocks, we're going to start working in singles in as well. Because people who have done my previous program probably saw singles throughout every single block. That's actually probably something that I've changed, is I don't do as much singles year round anymore. I tend to cycle those out. And probably one of the biggest reasons is if we're doing singles year round, they tend to be pretty similar. Like it's kind of the same singles over and over a lot of times, and athletes kind of get discouraged. They like some variability in their training. So if we're working through different rep ranges, it tends to break up the monotony and get a little bit more motivation of hitting these kind of new rep PRs. And I just see a better kind of buy-in and motivation throughout the year when we're kind of varying rep ranges a bit. And so if I want something close to a single, in the sense of like single being a testing, because a single is not something we max out on to see like all the time, as if anyone should know who's kind of understanding of why we program singles maybe year round, until we get to a meet when we do kind of start to kind of really push those. We can do the same thing with rep work, but like I said, I don't think it really translates well in the sense of like if we're wanting the similar effect as what the singles would do in the sense of testing. I don't think going over 2 or 3 reps really does much in the sense of kind of that same transference. So, all right, so we got a top set of 3, and then we're gonna have fatigue drop back offs at 5. Going to tempo bench. This is going to look a little bit weird to some, mainly because since comp bench is actually going to be in sense overall higher reps than that tempo bench day, which is probably going to flip-flop in later blocks when we start to change what is this secondary day. Main reason is tempo, there's a time under tension aspect. While I'm not really per se programming based off of time under tension, 4 reps is decently tough for tempo bench press. That's something where we're probably going to do lower reps, and since we're doing that on the secondary day, we're kind of swapping here where we're doing higher reps on this day, lower reps on this day. So, and then lastly here, we're going to get a lot of our volume through this close grip benching. So we're going to be doing sets of 8 there. That's kind of the bench is the one where I think most people can use higher reps and be completely fine, especially when we're going Larson. There's going to be less deviation in form since we're not worrying about leg drive. So we're going to have sets of 8 there. So, all right, going into pause deadlifts. So we're going to do a top set of 3, followed by middle set of 3, and then back off 5s. You're going to notice that's a little bit different than squat and bench, even though I programmed those somewhat similar in kind of the layout there. Deadlift I did a bit different, and that's because deadlift I think I tend to bias more towards intensity versus volume, especially on kind of these primary days. So I would rather have another kind of middle set of 3 versus going to 5s there. And then lastly, we'll have some RDLs, and we'll go sets of 8 on that. So. Okay, so last thing here, well, let's actually so you're gonna see here as I program, I have these little spots here for the kilograms to come out in case you're using kilo plates, and then also a calculation for total volume, which we're gonna have to program out as well. So you can see here, it's just a simple formula. I'm gonna be showing all the formulas as I go along, but here for some of the things that are already programmed in, it's just a simple formula dividing this by the kilos, and then volume is sets times reps times weight. So just adding that to every single column. Okay, we're good. And then down here, we're gonna go and make sure we're adding in the right days. So for squat, the total volume equals those 3 sections, okay? Bench, we've got primary day, secondary day, and tertiary day. And then deadlift, we've got our primary day and secondary day. So that's gonna be able to copy over. I'm just gonna copy that through all 4, and we should be good there. So one other thing you're going to see here, I'm going to get this in a bit. I usually don't actually put this in my normal programs because I'll just kind of write this out for the athlete, and I'll show how I write it out. For just the template, I included this. We're going to have a bottom end range and a top end range. That is there for the RPE sets, as I think it is good to have a range, and you'll kind of see how I program that out. So lastly here, we've got to go through the accessory movements. So we'll start on belt squat or leg press, so more of a volume-based block. We're going to get a little bit more volume through these, so let's go sets of 10 and 12. I mean, a lot of times you'll program accessory is pretty basic, and you'll just do something like 4 sets of 10 at 7 RPE or something like that. I like to be a little bit more intentional. We have a top set here of 10 at an 8 RPE, and then 3 sets of 12 at a 7 RPE each set. So what that means is to adjust every set based off of, to keep it around a 7. So if you're starting to fatigue at some certain weight, be able to drop that weight a little bit to make sure it stays around a 7 every single set. So, and we're starting out with this higher volume. The accessory work is probably going to be a little bit more periodized in the general structure of things when you're looking at rep ranges and whatnot, in the sense of all 3 blocks. So we're going to see kind of higher rep ranges here, and those are going to kind of slowly go down as we work our way through all 3 blocks. So dumbbell bench press, we're going to do sets of 8 here at 8 RPE. Whoops. So let's just copy and paste here, make that easy on ourselves. 8 RPE with a 7 RPE each set on that one. Then here we have 3 sets of 12 at 7 RPE. So you see that's a little bit different. We have this primary kind of pressing day, so we're gonna have a heavier top set while keeping the back also around a 7. While here, 3 sets of 12 at a 7 RPE. Let's actually go each set so you can kind of regulate as needed. So that's going to be a little bit less fatiguing since we're not going as heavy and not as much workload. So, all right. So going through the rest of the movements, we've got pull down a choice and row choice. Let's just do sets of 10 at a 7 to 8 RPE. We're going to go chest supported row. We'll go set of 12 there. Chest supported row is going to be a little less, I don't want to say less fatiguing, but it's a little bit safer in the sense of like not affecting other lifts by going a little bit higher reps there. So that's why we're doing that. And tricep extension of choice, set of 12 at an 8 to 9 RPE. Usually any tricep exercise, we're going to do higher reps because that's the point of it. We're not necessarily, we're trying to create hypertrophy so that the tricep can get stronger on actual pressing movements, but 8 to 9 RPE because mainly you need to, for those isolation movements, you can push those a little bit heavier in the sense of relative intensity. Hamstring curl of choice. Let's go sets of 10. You're gonna actually probably see as I go through in the next block, we're gonna actually adjust this a little bit as we start to change RDLs out. I always like to keep at least one hinge-based movement in. Since we've got RDLs here, we've got that satisfied. So we're gonna do a hamstring curl of choice. As we get into the next blocks, you're gonna see that we're gonna swap some of these RDLs out and eventually probably swap some of the hamstring curls out for something different, possibly, to be able to suffice to make sure we still have some type of hinge base. So at 7 to 8 RPE, and then face pulls, 12 at an 8 RPE. So we now have our framework for the days. Everything is set up. So all I'm gonna do now is we're gonna copy and paste. So let's go to each day. So what we're doing here is, this is pretty common for a lot of coaches, is 4-week blocks, and if they deload, having a 5th week deload. And I think in the sense of kind of structure, this is actually probably the average of what people respond to. I'd say probably the majority of people I coach fit into this 4-week block structure with a 5th week deload, with some going 3 weeks with a 4th week deload, some going 5 weeks with a 6th week deload. That's pretty much, I don't really see too many people outside of those 2 options, and it really just depends. I think most people tend to respond pretty well to this kind of 4-week structure. Let's make sure the editing worked out really well for everything. It looks like we're good. Okay, let's copy and paste the exercises all the way through. Copy, paste, good there in the editing. All right, let's start programming. So we've got our primary squat day. So what we're gonna be doing here, we're gonna work up to an 8 RPE on this week 4. I just tend to find, this is just a general sweet spot for people. I don't feel like many people need to push over an 8 RPE too often until we're going to start probably getting into those later blocks. I think it just has, for a lot of people, there's a disproportionate level of fatigue once you get past 8 RPE. So you'll obviously see as I go through a lot of this, that 8 RPE is going to kind of be the week 4 goal on those primary days. And that's just through trial and experimentation, going lower, going higher, seeing the middle ground of where people tend to respond to. And I just find that 8 RPE is a great range for that week 4 that allows us to get relatively close to kind of maximal intensity, but not so close that it's giving us a disproportionate level of fatigue or a disproportionate level of fatigue or form breakdown, because those kind of go hand in hand sometimes too. So from there, we're going to back off. So on this primary day, how we're going to be able to program this. So mRound function is going to help us to round to the nearest 5. So mRound of this day times 0.96 times 0.94 5. Let's explain. Let me program this real quick. M round of this times 0.96. So let's go 9.5. Find most people need to back off a little bit more on squat than they do something on like bench, and then even maybe a little bit more on deadlifts because it depends on the person of what they can kind of sustain. So overall, we're going to be doing a 10% back off. So from this top set, we're backing off 5% in the sense of just relative intensity, which if we're looking at the RPE chart, for the most part, 1 RPE is about 3%. Now it's going to change a little bit based on the rep scheme or anything like that, and the person, because this isn't like for everyone, but this is the one I found probably most accurate in the sense of RPE chart. And I went and actually made sure to include that in on the spreadsheet so you can be able to take a look at that. So looking at that though, about 3 RPE drop is, or 3% is about a 1 RPE drop. So you're going to see here, basically in sense, it's dropping 1.5 RPE to that middle back off, and then dropping another 1.5 RPE to those final back offs. If you want a little bit more information on that, I forget which video I actually covered that on, but one of my videos I really kind of broke down kind of decision making, kind of back off sets, and kind of what we're trying to accomplish there. So, yeah, so obviously I did the 5% there for the back off, and then 5% there for the back off. But we're changing rep schemes. That's why there's the 0.94. So if every rep is about 3% from, so you can see here, about 3%, about 3%. So if we're going from 3 to 5, we need a 6% back off. So that is why we have 0.94 in there. So we're calculating off of this, we're timesing by 0.95 for the back off percentage, 0.94 for the rep change, and then comma 5 for rounding to the nearest 5. So if you see I plug this in, it's going to give me all the work. So from there, let's copy and paste throughout. And what we're going to do there is we're going to do just a half RPE step drop each week. You're going to see, because of the primary day, we're going to keep relative intensity a little bit higher, and you're going to see on that secondary day, that's going to be a little bit different kind of how we do that. So we're going to do a step RPE that's going to progress up each week. I think even, this is kind of a personal opinion, some people like to program 8 RPE every week. I think when you do that, it ends up just being this anyways. Most people don't tend to start at an 8 RPE, and if you program at week 1, they tend to do this kind of step pattern. And it tends to work best as well, mainly because in these earlier weeks, we're trying to create adaptations from the new stimulus. In later weeks, we're starting to progressively overload from those adaptations. And some people need a little bit more of a big step. I mean, some people might need bigger steps of like going 8, 7, 6, 5 and starting out easier. Some people can handle a little bit of those smaller steps and starting out a little bit heavier. And I'd say most people on at least 1 day a week can do something like this on squat. So got that primary day squat programmed out. We're going to come back around to this with those ranges later. And then the secondary day, we're going to program percentage based versus RPE. And the reason for that is I want to make sure to control variables a little bit more. You're going to see this on really all these days, especially on this template approach. I want to make sure on the secondary squat day, secondary deadlift day, at least in future blocks, RDLs, we're not going to do that, and I explain that. And then that tertiary bench day, we're going to do percentage based. To be able to control variables a little bit. People tend to have an issue when everything's RPE, that they tend to start pushing the wrong days or going up there, things like that, and not allowing themselves to recover correctly, leading into that primary day and managing fatigue. So I want to control variables to make sure people aren't pushing too hard on this secondary day. So how we're going to program this? It's going to equal M round of B3. Which is the training max. So we're going to take that training max. Obviously, you can adjust that to what you think it should be. I also have some a post on how to determine training maxes, so I'll actually include that in the description box below, because again, a lot of this, if you're really trying to understand it, there's a lot that's going into this that I've explained prior that would just be too hard to explain now. So we're taking that training max times 0.9. That's going back again. If you look at my how to program variations video, I have a general framework for what I've found most people can do on different variations. And so for high bar and safety bar, most people can do about 90% of their 1RM compared to their regular low bar. Now, obviously that's different. If you're doing high bar squat, which is fine, maybe you're going to have to change this a little bit, and it'd probably be better if you're doing high bar squat here that you're going to do SSB here, but if you're doing low bar on the other day, choose whichever one you prefer. But either way, SSB or high bar, it's going to be about a 9% drop from that training max, and then from there we need to program the percentage. And when I program percentages, I actually think RPE. I don't think percentages. I think I want to program this day at a 7.5 RPE. So what does that mean? 4 at a 7.5 is 0.824. Round to the nearest 5. Boom, we've got our number. And then from there, we're going to do a 10% back off times 0.9. So 10% back off times 0.94 because we're backing off 2 reps just like the other day. And we've got that in. Okay. So we've got that day program percentage base. We're going to bring that all the way across, and then we're going to go change these. So like I said, on the primary squat day, we have these smaller kind of half RPE drops, which equates to about 1.5% drop each week, or increase each week as well. Here we're going to do an RPE drop each week. So it's going to start at a 7.5. Here it's going to be a 6.5, so we're actually going to go down to 7.99. So you can see here, if I started 4 at an 8.24, we got 7.99, 7.74, 7.51. This just goes back to, again, general things I've seen in regards to training is squat tends to be a little bit more fatiguing than like a bench press. You're going to see on bench press, we're not going to do probably these bigger step progressions. We're going to keep it pretty similar week to week. So then we're going to go down to 7.74. And 7.51. So one thing you'll see, this is just an aspect of percentage-based training. It's only going to drop 5 pounds from here to here, just because based off of percentage, that's all it's going to do, rounding to the nearest 5. But then we're going to see a 10-pound drop off for the next 2 weeks, and that's completely fine. You're just going to see, like, if I go program this at 600 pounds, you're going to see it obviously change. Now it's actually 15-pound jumps to a 10-pound jump to a 15-pound jump. And that's completely fine. It's never going to be a perfect science with percentage-based stuff, especially with a template. So if you see those jump, if you're like, why isn't it jumping 10 pounds? It's because that's just how it's going to program out based off of percentages, and that's completely fine. So we've got squat programmed out now for weeks 1 through 4 for both days. Let's move on to bench press. So bench press, what we're going to be doing, we're going to work up to an 8 RPE on this primary day as well. You're going to see as we get into further blocks, we might increase that a little bit more because this block isn't necessarily about having to push the highest intensities yet. We're going to start pushing that a little bit more in blocks 2 and 3. Bench is the lift more than any of them. Most people can handle higher intensities more often without that disproportionate fatigue. But this isn't the time for it yet. This is a block to more kind of establish general strength levels to then kind of use that to kind of work into future blocks. Always obviously establishing some higher workloads here with rep schemes on these accessory movements and also some of the rep schemes on the competition-based movements. So from there, we're going to fatigue drop. So since this is the primary day, we're not going to fatigue drop much. Equals M round of this times 0.97 times 0.94. So we're going a 6% drop because it's a set of 3 to a set of 5. And then we're doing just a 3% drop from that top set to the back off. So since it's programming this back off set, didn't put round to the nearest 5, programming this back off set at around a 7 RPE because it's just a 3% drop. And then from there, what we can do is drop from that 8% into those final sets. So I'll explain fatigue drop a little bit here. Let's actually copy and paste this throughout and then program it so that it makes sense a little bit more. So 7 and 6.5. We're not changing the fatigue drop there. Sometimes I might, but not in this setup we're not doing. And then here we need to adjust this. So I want people actually working back to an 8 RPE here. So what's going to happen is you're going to do that top set 8. Let's say that's 250 pounds. That's going to program in 230. You're going to do as many sets as you can of 230 with a total of possibility of 4 sets as long as you don't hit an 8 RPE. But let's say you hit that 8 RPE on the second set. You're going to stop there, insert in that you did 2 sets, and then you're going to do 2 sets of 5 at 210. It's just a way to regulate average intensity. Do not think it's a fail if you can't get all 4 sets. What this is going to do is really regulate average intensity best for you so that you're not working too hard. If you can get all 4 sets, awesome. That's because you need it. If you can't get all 4 sets, awesome. That's because you don't need it. this is a way just to regulate that back off work in a way to kind of optimize it to each person, especially kind of in this templated approach where I don't know your optimum back off work and kind of the percentage drop downs. This is the way to do it. So let's bring that back. So that is going to change though week to week. We're going to have this going to basically match the top set. So you're going to have a top set and an RPE. You're going to do as many of these top set fatigue drop sets until you hit the same RPE, because that's kind of the RPE top end range we want to work at for the day. Okay, so you're going to see obviously that decreases with as we go along. So that's the primary day. Obviously higher average intensity and peak intensity just because of fatigue drop and that set. So working into this secondary day, we're going to drop that average intensity a little bit to a 7.5 RPE. We're going to back off that middle set by 0.95 and then back off again 0.95. So about a 5% drop here. So that would make this set, not accounting for fatigue, just straight up, this would make this set around a 6 RPE and this set around like a 4.5 RPE. Now, fatigue sets in. This fatigues this set, which fatigues this set, and there's 3 sets here. So that's going to not be perfectly linear in the sense of it's always going to be that RPE, but that's why we're programming back-offs in the manner we are, to be able to make sure we're not getting these back-off sets to be too hard, and they're kind of usually, for the most part, staying below this 7.5 RPE. So let's bring this all the way through. We're going to do a small drop, like I said, on squat. On that secondary day, we did those bigger drops each week, where here we're just doing that slight step progression because it's all right if this day is still pushed a little bit heavier. And you're going to see probably in future blocks, we're going to push this kind of secondary day pretty hard too. But again, not the point yet with this block. This block is to kind of set some framework for future blocks. So that's why we're going to 7.5 RPE here, 7.5 RPE here versus 8 on the other day, where there's very well possible options with people I coach, especially on bench. We might put both of those days to similar RPEs, and just because of set count or the fatigue drop, that's where the difference in fatigue is going to accumulate, even though we're working to the same kind of peak at a relative intensity. So, and then that tertiary day, we're going to go program based off of percentage based. So B4, because that is bench, we're going Larson. Larson, I find most people do about 94% of their regular 1RM, and we have close grip. So we're going to go 97% for that. So we're compounding those. We have 6% drop because of Larson, 3% drop because of close grip, and then we're going to get the RPE we want. So we're going to go to a 7 RPE on this day. So 8 at a 7 is 707. So 0.707, round to the nearest 5, and good. One thing I will say, let's actually get this programmed out now. M round of this times 0.9, so a 5% or a 10% back off there. You're going to see a little bit more on some days where you might back off a little bit more. We're definitely going to see that on bench and squat, but most people can be able to handle this no problem. Might even be able to back off a little bit less, but it just depends on the person. So one thing on bench in particular, let's actually copy and paste and see if this happens at all as we program this. So we're just going to do kind of a linear drop each week. So it's going to go to 694. Let me make sure on that one. 694. So we had 8, 707, 694, 68, and 667. Is that correct? Yep. All right, so that worked out great. 180, 185, 190, 195. Great. Issue is people who tend to have about a 250 pound max or less on bench doesn't work out as great. 150, 155, 160, 160. Here, you see it starts repeating. That's gonna happen. 5 pound jumps are too much for most people who have a 250 pound bench or less. What I'm gonna recommend is you get some micro plates. If you're gonna, I think everyone under a 250 pound bench should be using micro plates, and what you can go in yourself and edit this program once you make a copy is go in and change that round to a 1. And you can see here, once you change it to a 1, it's gonna give you much more accurate numbers for you. You can see here, now it's a 3 pound drop down because that is the equivalent of someone benching 300 pounds doing a 5 pound drop. So that's something you can do to kind of tailor this program towards you. is if you bench 250 or less, go get some micro plates and then make sure to go in and change the rounding to the nearest one. You'll want to do that for this as well. Go through all the bench and change it to the nearest one. So that's just an option for people to be able to do, but let's go back to what it was already at. Whoops. Okay, that's programmed. So I believe now, oh, I got deadlift. Okay. So deadlift. We're gonna work to a general, okay, so deadlift's gonna be a little bit different. We're not gonna work to the same intensity. Deadlift's a little bit more fatiguing. I'm not really worried about this block of really pushing super hard. Let's keep fatigue managed. So there's gonna be a big difference here though in kind of how we do the back off. So we are going to back off. We're gonna back off 6% here, so 9-4. And then we're gonna back off another 6%. So, but we have the rep drops, we gotta do another 0.94. So total of a 12% back off to the final 2x5. So let's copy and paste this. So one thing on deadlift is I find people kind of need that high peak intensity, but they can't work at high average intensities. Yeah, it's gonna be a 5.5. No, I was right. 6. Okay, so we got the step drop 6, 6.5, 7, 7.5. So working at higher peak intensities, but most people are going to tend to kind of struggle having that average high intensity. So what we're going to do is the back offs are actually going to have a bigger step drop. So even though the top set only backs off a half RPE, the rep work is going to in a sense back off a full RPE. So like it would be like if it was programming off of a 6.5 RPE here. So what you're going to do here is times 0.985 for basically that 1.5%. So now that's a 1.5% drop. We're going to have to do now an extra, since this is only going down to half, we're going to have to go to 0.97. And this is going to go to 0.955. So the back off work is programming like if it was a full RPE drop every single time. Like this was 6.5, this was 5.5, this was 4.5. That's what the back off work is programming off of. And so the back off work relative, like if we do 400, 400, 400, 400, you can see the back off work is actually increasing relative to that top set as we go along to be able to increase average intensity throughout those weeks. All right, and lastly here we've got RDLs. RDLs tend to not be super fatiguing, so I don't mind working at kind of like a higher, I don't want to say high intensity, 7 RPs, not much, but we're gonna do that plus a 9% drop to those back offs. And then we're not gonna do, it's gonna be pretty similar each week because for the most part, people on RDLs, especially if you haven't been doing them, you're gonna get a progression just from kind of that new stimulus of working them back in since people don't always do them all the time. So you're actually gonna see 6 RPE, 6 RPE, the same week 1 and 2. The assumption is, because it's probably a new variation, you're gonna be able to easily just add a little bit of weight because you're going from week 1 to week 2. And there's a progression and adaptation occurring there, and then it's gonna slightly bump up to 6.5 and 7 RPE. So, all right. Lastly there, we've got to program the deload week. So, one, I'm gonna start taking these out because we aren't gonna be having any insert weights or necessarily top sets, so we don't really have those. And we're gonna go through and program based off of the movement. So for the deload, if you really wanna understand the entirety of what I'm doing here deload wise, you definitely want to check out my video on how to program a deload week to understand kind of why these numbers are what they are. But for squat, what we're gonna do is a 10% drop in intensity from the prior week. So I'm gonna take this cell times 0.9, rounding to the nearest 5, and what you're gonna see here is nothing's gonna calculate. It's just gonna be blank because it's not gonna do, well, it's gonna calculate there since that was percentage based, but it's not, this isn't gonna change or do anything until you put in weight here, and then it will tell you what to do the next week. So for bench, we're gonna do 935. And again, this is just me taking the averages of what I think most people respond to and programming that in. If you want more info on kind of exactly all my thought process of deload weeks, make sure to check that out. And then lastly here, let's take this and just edit it. For deadlift, we're gonna go a 15% drop. Most people need to deadlift, deload deadlift more, so we're gonna do a little bit more of a drop there. So the last thing here, or at least for the competition movements, is we're gonna go edit the actual rep schemes. So for bench, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna drop a rep each day. For squat, I'm gonna drop a rep on the primary day from each set. I'm gonna drop a rep from the secondary day, and also drop a set. And I'm gonna try and show here in a second kind of what that does volume-wise. Let me go back up here because I'm kind of jumping ahead. So bench rep drop, deadlift, we're gonna do a rep drop and a set drop both days. Going back to bench, we have a rep drop. We're not gonna drop sets, we're just gonna match them from the previous week. So I'm gonna do equals the previous week. And so however many sets you do, let's say you did 2 sets, it's gonna tell you to do the same amount of sets for those on the next week as well. And then I already did high bar squat there, so we're gonna go 2, 2, 4, and then a set drop there. So if I program, I'm just gonna throw in random numbers. 300, 400, 200. Okay, now why did bench not program out? Oh, let's do that. Okay, so you're gonna see here the average drop now. So bench drops, I think that's gonna probably be about 70 to 80%. Squat is dropping probably about 50 to 60%. That's more around 60. And then deadlift there is dropping, that's just a little bit under 50%. I usually keep it around 50, but that's completely fine. That's because we have those higher rep RDLs and that made a pretty big difference, and future blocks is probably gonna get closer to 50% or just above it. So this is just that it's just a system I figured out of kind of an easy way to be able to accomplish this task, because I tend to do pretty similar volume drops for most people. It's the intensity drop that I change. And again, that goes back to looking at my deload week video, and that's gonna make a lot more sense of those. Let me get that. Okay. And lastly here, we need to go through and deload the accessories too. So for all like compound accessories, like dumbbell bench press, belt squat, anything that's kind of heavy, like actually is kind of fatiguing, we're gonna go 90% of last week's weight. It's not gonna be RPE based. So whatever you did the prior week, drop down 90%. We're just copy and paste that to all of these that are more of the primary pressing movements. For the other ones, we're gonna drop like an RPE or so. So we're gonna go to at 6 to 7 RPE if it says 7 to 8. So we're gonna copy and paste that to all of the 7 to 8 ones. And then the ones that are like 8 to 9 or 8 or above, we're gonna go down to a 7 RPE for those. And then lastly, we're gonna go through and drop a set from each accessory movement. So volume drop and a little bit of an intensity drop there. So a set from each one, 2, 3, 2, and there. So, all right. Last couple things to program. These are kind of like the little minute things that just kind of add a little bit of flair to it. So one thing I added is a lot of times what I'm gonna do just for my athlete is I'm gonna go up to competition pause squat. If I'm doing a pause squat, we're gonna do their max B3 times 0.925 because it's the pause squat times 0.863 because that is an 8 RPE of 3. That's gonna say 320. So I might go in there and give them a range of 310 to 330. I'm just gonna put it in there like that. Obviously, I can't go edit this for every single person, so I did include this top and bottom range. So what we're gonna do here is B3 times 0.925 times 0.863 times 1.03. So we've got the pause squat, we've got the RPE, and we've got a 3% increase for the top end range, and then the opposite, a 3% decrease for the below range. So if I was to program this percentage based, it would be 320. But I'm giving you here a bottom end and a top end range. I do want to say the RPE trumps this range. If you truly, because this is just a guess off of pause squats. Maybe you're stronger at pause squats than the 7.5% drop. If you can truly go outside of this range, do so. The RPE trumps that, below or above. But this range is gonna have to kind of guide you. So what I'm gonna do is we're gonna program this throughout. So I'm gonna bring this down. So if we're going to 7.5 RPE, that's 85%. So you're gonna see it's gonna drop that a little bit. $837 to drop it to a 7 RPE, and then 824 to a 6.5. What I would recommend, maybe even though the RPE is what really matters, unless you've got a very strong confidence you should be going above or below this on weeks 1 and 2, probably stick within that RPE. Then weeks 3 and 4, as you push a bit more and the adaptations have taken place and you're trying to overload, if that's where you can be a little bit more confident that maybe you can go outside of those if you really feel like it. Like that's where we're starting to start pushing a bit. But those ranges are there to kind of help, and they're probably going to be a little bit more accurate when it's not on a variation like a pause squat. But this is at least kind of helps to give you kind of a guiding range. So we're going to apply this to everything though. We got to apply this to the main bench press day. Whoops. So bench press, we got to change that to the bench press max. We're going to take away the pause squat, but it's still 863 for an 8 RPE, and we're going to go above and below that. So, okay. So it's going to give you a range of 250 to 265. Again, you can definitely go outside of that, but make sure you have very strong confidence that you can go outside of that and still hit. So you can see here, like some of the times the ranges aren't going to change. It's based off of rounding, and that's completely fine. What you should be doing is knowing that the range that probably is like if you see 245 to 265, that means 255 is probably most likely the number you should go in planning to kind of think you're going to do. And then based off of warmth and how you feel and last week versus this week, you can adjust based in that within that range. So 837 and 824. Okay, so we also do have a range we need for this tempo bench press day. Tempo bench, if you go back and look at how I program these, with a set of 4, I'm going to program that at 0.95 of a drop off, because each rep I'm going to change a little bit. I think if I was to program just a single, it would be 0.98. So every rep after is another percent. So 2 reps would be 0.97, 3 reps would be 0.96, 4 reps would be 0.95. So we are going to a 4 RPE, or 4 reps at a 7 RPE. So if you're looking at that, 4 reps at a 7.5 RPE is 824. Let's exit out of that one. So we got to change this to 824. Let's actually copy this both ways so I don't have to change all the other stuff. And then we're going to go 0.97 for the bottom end. So 811, 799, or no, 811. I don't know what I'm doing there. 799, 799, 786, and 786. Okay, and the last one. So the only one I'm not going to give it for, and this is also, I kind of mentioned this, if this was like a pause deadlift or a regular deadlift, a competition deadlift, I probably would program this day percentage based. But since it's RDLs, me as a coach, even if you were my client, I probably don't know what you can RDL. That's pretty individual and different. That's really hard to know. And especially in a template, I don't know what you're going to do RDL wise. I think it's usually about 80% is what I see, but it's just going to be RPE, and I'm not even going to give a range because like, I just don't know. Just like the accessories, I'm not going to give a range. I don't know. That's going to be a very hard thing to tell. Excuse me. Very hard thing to tell, so we're not going to program a range for that. Last thing we will program a range for, though, is deadlift. So we got to go to deadlift. We've got to go to a pause deadlift. So 0.925 for the pause times 3 at a 7.5, which is going to be 0.85. And there we go. And we'll program that bottom end range. Again, especially on these pauses on pause deadlift and pause squats, you very well may be able to go outside of this range. That is very, very possible, since these aren't going to be perfectly accurate. These are just guesstimates. Feel free to go outside of them if you really feel like you can. Don't feel like you have to stick within these, but they definitely help to give a guiding range, especially for people who aren't as comfortable with RPE and kind of need some help of kind of an idea of what they should be doing. So 811 and 811. All right. I think now we have everything. Oh, I got one more thing. Okay. So the last thing I'm programming here is the calculated weekly max chart. So let's actually delete all of this. Okay. So let's go to squat first. What we're going to do is this is going to equal your top set weight. So once you plug that in, it's going to go there, and this is going to equal your RPE. So if you plug in 300 and rate it a 7, you can see here it projects out a 336 max. But we do have to make an adjustment. It's a set of 3. So what has to be done is it's going to be -2. So I'm going to do that in a second here after I get the rest of these programmed in. So I'm going to go equals equals. One thing here, I'm not going to go through it. You can look at it yourself and you make a copy. There's a big old if-then formula here. So that's something that's that would be a whole video just to talk about if-then formulas, but that's how it's able to work out there. So week 3 on squat, week 4, squat. Okay, and then I'm gonna go through and do -2. And the reason for that is because whatever the RPE is, it's actually -2 off the weight, because if you rate this a 6.5, if it was a single, it was really a 4.5. So that's why it's being able to change there. So now you're gonna see if you put in 300 and rate it a 6.5, it's gonna change it to a 4.5 and give you an estimated 1 RM based off of that. So that doesn't mean that estimated 1 RM is perfect. It's just a guide to kind of see the weekly progression on kind of how things are going. So we'll do the same for bench as well. It'll be a little bit easier here because I'll be able to kind of use the squat as a guide, as you'll see. So I got those days in. I'm gonna program in deadlifts. And then what I'll do, so that's 43. So I see that's M, so equals M43. That's V equals V43. And that is AE, so equals AE43. Oops, AE43. Okay, I got the bench for the set. And then we got to go for this, that's 43 as well. Okay, that's going to be N 43 minus 2, W 43 minus 2, and AF 43 minus 2. And then lastly, we got deadlift. So deadlift is 56. So we're going to have M 56, V 56, AE 56. Oop, was I wrong there? Oh, I put 65, 56. And then we've got equals N 56 minus 2 equals W 56 minus 2 equals AF 56 minus 2. So now every single, it needs to be minus 2. Every single time you program any of those sets in, -2, and those are all right. Okay, anytime you program any of those sets in, that's gonna auto-calculate up here and give you some estimated maxes and totals. Obviously, these are variations. They're off of reps. They're not perfect, but at least gives you a guide of kind of how you're progressing. So based off of that, we've got block 1 down. So obviously goals are, as I already kind of mentioned, is kind of working on hitting rep PRs on these variations. They're gonna self-limit, but still kind of pushing to higher relative intensities while we get volume through accessories and some of these back off sets on these secondary or tertiary days, and kind of set up a framework of then building into the next 2 blocks. So one thing I want to do is, even though I'm going to be covering this kind of a little bit throughout the writing of this program, I do want to give kind of a brief breakdown of kind of just how to use the program. Well, what you need to insert, how to edit, how to interpret everything. So it just makes sense within the programming of it. The exercise selection, I think throughout the explanation was pretty easy to kind of follow, but kind of like the programming, kind of what you're inserting, I want to make sure everyone has a good idea of kind of what they're doing there. So to kind of end this first video, we'll go through that. So that people who want to hop right into this program already kind of have this kind of instructional guide of kind of how to use it and be able to take that and be able to implement that. So, all right, so getting right into it. So when you see one of these RPE top sets, obviously it says insert weight. You are not inserting the weight here. You are deleting the @6 RPE and inserting the weight here. So I'm just going to type in a random number. You're going to insert in 200. You'll insert that in. That will give you the back off weight. And then here's where you put the RPE of the weight. So let's say it was a 6. You'll delete that and say it was a 6 RPE, and that's your way to keep track. And you can even do the rest of the RPEs too to kind of keep track. Okay, this was a 5, and this was a 5.5 after all 3 sets. To kind of keep track of your last set RPE, is that kind of gives you a good framework of then looking at next week's kind of how things are going and what's going, what not. So, looking at accessory work, there's a couple different ways I'm programming these. You'll have something like 3 sets of 12 at a 7 RPE each set. That means adjust the weight every set to be around a 7 RPE. So let's say on the first set you use 60-pound dumbbells, then 60s, and then you have to adjust. You're like, I can't do another set of 60 at a 7 RPE. You're gonna go down to 55. And you can say here, 7 RPE on that last set. Definitely feel free. Obviously, this is going to be your own template to be able to edit however you want, but how I usually instruct my athletes to do it is to delete the RPE, insert in the weight they use so they can keep track of it. Because your goal should be to progress, especially when doing accessory work. It's usually new. since these cycle in and out a little bit more than the competition movements, which stay in all the time, as well as the rep schemes are changing. So the assumption is probably next week you can go to 65 and try it. Maybe you try 65 and you're like, just too much. We're gonna drop down to 60 for the next ones. The next week after that, I'm gonna try 65 again. And this time it is a 7 RPE. I do a second set, I don't think I can do a third set, do 60. And then maybe the last week, you can do 65 all 3 sets. Go with the assumption that you're trying to progress weekly and then adjust as needed. Because understand RPE is a range. RPE is not like if you don't hit this exact number, you did it wrong. Especially with the accessory movements, it is a range. Now, different way to program it though, is 4 sets of 10 at a 7 to 8 RPE. What that means is you're gonna find that first set around a 7 to 8 RPE, and then you're gonna repeat that same weight all 3 sets, no matter what, even if it gets harder. So let's say that was 100 pounds or 100 on whatever setting you did. By the last set, maybe it was an 8 RPE or an 8.5 because it got harder because you did 4 compounding sets of the same weight. The next week, you can say, okay, I'm gonna try 105. It was still probably within kind of that range. Oops. So it was 8.5. Good. You did all 4 sets at 105. The next week, I'm going to try and go 110. That was probably more of an 8.5 to start. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to drop down to 105 for the rest of them because that's the weight I should have done, and then do an 8.5. If that makes, or whatever RPE it was in the last set. Or the other option is maybe like you're like, I don't think I can go to 110 today. You did 105, but let's say it was like a 6.5 RPE. And you're like, that was really easy. I think I could definitely go up. Feel free to adjust. Go up to 110 for the next 3 sets. Just use that as a range. It doesn't have to be this set standard. It has to be perfect. Use it as a range of progression and then adjust those sets as needed within that range each week. So looking at day 2 with pause squats, it's the same thing. You're gonna insert in a weight. It's gonna give you the back off sets. Nothing too crazy there. For Larson close grip bench, you have percentage based work. So there's nothing gonna change there. It's already percentage based. You're just gonna rate that RPE. Let's say it was a 6 and this was a 5. Just putting that in there. RDLs, inserting in the weight, delete that. Let's say it was 200 pounds, 200, and it was a 6.5 RPE, inserting in the weight. And then lastly here, we've got a top set of belt squat or leg press. And so you're gonna have maybe a top set of 120, and then you're gonna back off to 105 for the sets of 12, and keep that at a 7 RPE each set. And maybe it was 105, and then you're gonna have to drop down to 100 for the third set because you couldn't maintain a 7 RPE, and you knew you probably had to drop a little bit. So just adjusting within that range. So, probably the only other thing here that isn't within the kind of the parameters of kind of what I've already mentioned is the fatigue drop, which I kind of described as I was programming it. The fatigue drop, you're going to insert in the weight you did, say 200 pounds, and it's going to give you sets of 5 at 180 or 165. You've got 4 total sets. All of those sets could be at 180 as long as none of those sets go over a 6.5 RPE. Let's say you do set 1 and it was a 7 RPE. That means you're only going to do 1 set. So you're going to delete that 1 plus 4 total sets, and you're going to do 3 back-offs. And that could change every week. Maybe week 1, you only get 1 set. Maybe week 2, you get 2. Maybe week 3, you get 1. Maybe week 3, you get, or week 4, you get 3. That can change every single week. That's not standardized. This is simply a way to regulate that average intensity of those back-off work, because a lot of people can handle higher average intensities on bench work. So I do this fatigue drop instead of just doing straight sets. I do the fatigue drop because it's going to individualize each person. Maybe some people are going to do them straight sets and have no problem doing so, and maybe some people are going to do 1 set and fatigue out and burn out real quick, and they're going to have to drop off, and it's going to regulate the program accordingly to them. So that's why it's there. And just notice the fatigue drop goes up. So every week that fatigue drop's going up, and you're just going to do as many sets within those 4 total sets of that top weight before then backing off. So from there, dumbbell bench press, top set at 8 RPE. So maybe that was 70 pounds, and then you're going to back off a little bit. Let's maybe go into like 65, and you're going to do that for all 3 sets maybe, or adjust within that 7.5 RPE. So 4 sets of 12 at a 7 to 8 RPE. That's going to mean that you're going to have a top set or a first set of 12, and you're going to repeat that same weight for all 4 sets. Even if the RPE gets a little bit higher than the 7 to 8, you're just going to keep repeating that weight. And then same thing with the tricep extensions. Day 4, high bar SSB. You've got your percentage-based work. For pause deadlifts, you've got that top set, so you're going to insert that in. It's going to give you the rest of the work. And then we've got our hamstring, curl, choice, and face pulls. So this is going to be pretty standard, kind of how this is going to set up through all 3 blocks. So most of the things that I kind of showed here are going to apply. As I mentioned, when you do certain sets, such as like the competition squat, let's say you did 400 and it was a 7 RPE, that's going to give you a calculated weekly max up here. So you're going to see as you go along each week, that's going to insert as long as you're rating those things. But yeah, outside of that, that should be kind of all you need to know in the sense of kind of how to use the program. Outside of what I've already explained within the written program. Actually, the only other thing I'll say, just in case you didn't watch me writing the program, I have rep cadence here. So if it's a tempo bench press, we have a 3-second eccentric or descent, a 1-second pause, and a 0-second concentric. Some people will put an X here because it just means there's no designation. You're just doing it per se as fast as you can. And then lastly here, I have some options. Well, you'll see like tempo bench, pause squat, 0, 1, 0. Some of them won't see anything. So like high bar SSB, I didn't put anything because it would just be 0, 0, 0. There's no designation of the eccentric. There's no designation of a pause. There's no designation of a concentric. It's just do the movement. So there's no designation there versus the other ones I try to give that. So, and the same for the accessory work. None of these have designations, and some are of choice or have options. So incline dumbbell bench or machine chest press of choice. Just because this is for a template. People are going to have different options of what they can do at the gym. So I did of choice to be able to kind of give you some options there. But I will be a bit more specific on some, like chest supported row of choice. Make sure it's chest supported and you're not having to kind of like stay bent over and support the weight. Or hamstring curl of choice, whatever hamstring machine curl you like. Only one I did that's more specific is face pulls. I think everyone could either do face pulls with a band or rings or a cable machine. That should be able to kind of be pretty universal. So hopefully that makes sense though. Obviously, if you have any questions within this, you can feel free to message me and email me, and I'd be happy to help. But otherwise, that's going to be video 1. That was actually longer than I thought. I was actually going to break this up into just 2 videos of blocks 1 and 2, and then block 3 with the optional peaking block. But after doing block 1, that took a good hour or so. So I'm going to cut that to just 1 video. So there's going to be a total of 3 videos in this series that are going to keep coming out. The program's going to come out right away, but I'm going to make sure to cover all 3 blocks, and that's going to kind of coincide with probably if you start this program right away, when the blocks are going to be coming, or when you're going to be starting that next block. If I release these every 3 to 4 weeks or whatnot. So yeah, hopefully I did this because not only did I want to do a new program, I know when I first started coaching, I would have loved someone just to watch them write a program, like see every detail of it, because it makes so much more sense when you can not only know the theorization of it, but see it kind of actually being written out on paper. So hopefully people have been following me along and kind of trying to mimic some of the things I do and take the information. This really kind of puts it in perspective of how this kind of really plays out in the actual program organization and writing. So if you like this, you got something out of it, make sure to like, comment, share, subscribe, and any questions you have, feel free to comment below. Otherwise, I will talk to you later.